Hello guys, welcome to the Parson series, and today we'll be dealing diabetic retinopathy from the very Parsons. So last time we had already discussed the beautiful concepts of hypertension retinopathy. Today we are dealing with the diabetic retinopathy. Now diabetes is a common disease and occurs in one of the following forms. So we have got two types of diabetes. We have got type 1 insulin dependent, and then we have got type 2 that is non-insulin dependent. And this disease will result in your macro as well as microvascular complications. Now why microvascular? Because you know that it's a microangiopathy, a very important word. It's a microangiopathy, and this microangiopathy is linked with the glycemic control. So basically the complications that we are having in the eye, especially the microvascular complications, they are related to the glycemic index, and it is affecting the kidneys, eyes and the peripheral nerves. That is why diabetes forms a very important part in your integrated questions, because at a time it is affecting kidney also, eye also, as well as nerves also. Then on the other hand, we also have the macrovascular complications. These are more common in the diabetic patients if you are comparing it with the normal population, but it is not necessarily linked to the hyperglycemia, and it is affecting the heart, brain and limbs. So as eye per se, we are more interested in the microvascular complications which are linked with the glycemic index. A characteristic picture is seen in the fundus. However, in the elderly population, the ophthalmoscopic picture may be complicated by the arteriosclerosis, hypertension or even the renal disease. Almost all the patients of type 1 diabetes develop a retinopathy in 15 years. So as you know that duration is the most important factor in the diabetic retinopathy. So if a patient is having type 1 diabetes more than 15 years, there are many chances, it's very likely that the patient will develop the diabetic retinopathy. In diabetes, the risk of retinopathy increases with duration. I think this is the golden line, and you cannot afford to forget the relation of the diabetes with the duration. D for diabetes, D for duration. Accompanying hypertension is there, smoking is there, and they say that diabetics have a 20 to 25% greater risk of blindness as compared to the normal population. I think this is not small, 20 to 25% more chances of developing the blindness. As therapy of the retinopathy will at best stabilize the vision or decrease the rate of visual loss, it is important that we screen all the diabetics annually by examining the fundus after dilating the pupil. And strict diabetic control or the strict glycemic control helps to stabilize the retinal changes. So whatever changes we do have in the diabetic retinopathy, it's very important that we are putting the patient on the strict diet control, and metabolic changes actually do determine that what amount of microvascular complications will be occurring in the retina. So strict control of blood sugar is one of the most important part in the treatment of diabetic retinopathy. Now let's start with the pathogenesis. Histopathological examination of the eyes with the diabetic retinopathy shows the loss of intramural pericytes. Then we have got thickening of the basement membrane, and we have progressive closure of the retinal capillary. So this is the pathology aspect of the diabetic retinopathy. What is actually the pathology behind the microaneurysms that you get in the patients of the microangiopathy of diabetic retinopathy? We have got loss of pericytes, then we have got thickening of the basement membrane and also the closure of the capillaries. The initial loss of the pericytes will lead to the formation of dilatations, and these are actually called as a microaneurysm. So the very basic thing that you get in the patients of diabetic retinopathy, the microaneurysms, is due to the loss of pericytes. If you remember, I told you that it is just like bulb like extensions which are coming out. So these outpouchings that you are getting from the vessels, these are actually your microaneurysms. And second important thing is your breakdown of blood retinal barrier. Due to the breakdown of blood retinal barrier, there is a leakage of the vascular contents. Now edema is also present in all such areas, and we have got hard exudates, we have got dot and blot hemorrhages. D for diabetic retinopathy, D for dot and blot hemorrhages, D for deep hemorrhages. Then we have got D, hard exudates, maybe D है, As you know that when we talk about the hypertension retinopathy, it is the superficial flame shaped hemorrhages, it is the soft exudates or the cotton wool spots which are important. Similarly, when I'm talking about the diabetic retinopathy, you have to think about hard exudates, you have to think about the dot and blot hemorrhages along with the edema. Now, in addition, there is also increased aggregation. Now, another important pathology part, that there is an increased aggregation of platelets which is causing the non-perfusion. Non-perfusion is causing ischemia, and ischemia is leading to the neovascularization. So, what is the exact pathology that is actually causing the neovascularization? You know, the hallmark of PDR is neovascularization. So, this is leading to the ischemia, and the body attempts to re-establish the blood supply. That is why we have got shunt vessels, and these shunt vessels are called as IRMA. Now, whenever there is non-perfusion, whenever there is hypoxia, whenever there is ischemia, there is always, you know, chain in our body which is trying to repair it. So, we have got opening up of the shunt vessels for that, due to which we have development of IRMA, intraretinal microvascular abnormalities, and on the other hand, they are also releasing more and more vascular endothelial growth factor that is also compensating. So, we have more and more VEGF that leads to the neovascularization at the border. This neovascular tissue is more friable, bleeds and lead to fibroblastic response. So, I hope this whole of the cycle is very, very clear. We have got microvascular changes, we have loss of pericytes, we have outpouchings, we have got microaneurysms, we have got the hemorrhages, we have got the hard exudates, and all these things, you know, especially with the aggregation of the platelets, is leading to non-perfusion. Non-perfusion is leading to ischemia, ischemia is leading to IRMA. It is also causing more release of vascular endothelial growth factor, due to which we have more of neovascularization, and these blood vessels are more friable and more fragile, and therefore more of bleeding. Now, the causal factors have not been identified, but certain risk factors are there. Now, let's look at the risk factors in the development of diabetic retinopathy. Poor control of the diabetes is associated with the earlier onset. All those people who are having diabetes and they do not have good control. So, always take care that you do the HbA1c test, so that you get to know what is the scenario of the previous 3 months. Is this patient well in control of the blood sugar or not? Because no matter how good treatment you are going on, but if the glycemic index is high, more and more lesions are going to develop. The frequency of incidence of diabetic retinopathy also increases with the length of the time patient had diabetes. So, as I told you before also, the duration of diabetes always remains the most important. Even though the general disease is mild or has been well controlled, it usually occurs in the elderly patient. Then another important risk factor is the elderly age group, and this has become more common since the use of the insulin, because insulin has actually increased the lifespan of the diabetics. That is the reason that now, because the patient is living for a longer time, we are getting more of the complications in them. Retinopathy is common but not invariable after the disease has lasted 10 years and affects majority after 20 years. So, it is very common in the people who have already lived with 10 years of diabetes and almost there. If the patient has lived with 20 years of diabetes, it affects both the young as well as old, for it is a diabetic age. See, this is a very important thing, that it is a diabetic age that is more important than the chronological age. If a patient is younger but he has already lived with 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of diabetes, will definitely have more risk of development of diabetic retinopathy in comparison to that person who is elderly but not lived with the diabetes for so many years. Uncontrolled systemic hypertension, then we have got another risk factors, like if there is associated hypertension, a poor renal status, smoking, these are other important risk factors. So, definitely, if diabetes is there associated with hypertension, elderly age group, male, smoking, you know, poor renal status, all these things. Sorry, it's not male, rather it's more common in females, especially if it is anemia also, pregnancy also. Then all these things are again the important risk factors. Now, if I talk about ophthalmoscopically, now this again becomes very, very important, because many a times questions are coming when they are asking you pertaining to the ophthalmoscopic finding of the diabetic retinopathy. So, first of all, let us talk about the earliest changes of the background diabetic retinopathy or the non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Now, many a times there was a confusion, what are the differences between the background diabetic retinopathy, non-proliferative, proliferative and maculopathy. So, we will be discussing that. So, it is a microangiopathy and therefore, it is affecting the smaller blood vessels. So, we have got small dot and blot hemorrhages and we have microaneurysms. I told you that microaneurysms, I think, is the hallmark feature of the diabetic retinopathy, earliest feature of diabetic retinopathy, hallmark of NPDR, because obviously for the PDR it will be the neovascularization. Because you know, whenever you are having microaneurysms, you are thinking in terms of the microangiopathies, and microangiopathy will lead to the development of microaneurysms, and they are appearing as minute round dots. So they are very small, you know, pinpoint hemorrhages that would be there, and obviously this is an early sign of background diabetic retinopathy. Now till now we do not have edema. Edema is not marked all over the posterior pole, but we have got, you know, hard exudates, waxy looking patches of exudates, they are there. The early treatment of diabetic retinopathy scale is commonly used, that we will be talking about. The fully developed ocular picture, we have microaneurysms. It is also associated with the glomerulosclerosis in the kidney. This is called as the Kimmelstein-Wilson nephropathy. Now I am sure that you must be dealing with nephropathy in pathology in medicine, but taking your attention towards that this can give you a very good integrated question. So you can mark this as your HILD integrated question. Okay, you can mark it as the integrated question. You can put it at I, because at that time when the question comes in front of you, this may not strike, but if you are highlighting them and revising just before the examination, yes, this was an integrated question, then there are more possibilities of this being recalling in your exam, that microaneurysms and glomerulosclerosis means this one. The management consists of metabolic control that I told you. Along with this, you have to deal with any other risk factor like hypertension and other things that are present. All right. So this is your background diabetic retinopathy, where you can see you are seeing those small bulb-like areas which are your microaneurysms. You can also see that one whitish area. This is your you know, exudate is also there, large area. So this is your background retinopathy. Your early treatment of diabetic retinopathy scale, with the help of which you can easily tell that which stage it is. First of all, if I have got no retinopathy, I do not have any changes, then I will say that diabetic retinopathy is absent. So that is very clear and easy, not a problem. Now see the second one. When you see the second one, we have got very mild NPDR. When we have got very mild, that means only microaneurysm. So if I have only microaneurysms in the question, then that will go with the very mild. Then we come to the mild. Mild may I have got microaneurysms with hard exudates, cotton wool spots with the hemorrhages. So that is your basically everything. Okay, little everything is present. That is your mild NPDR. You have got microaneurysms also, hard exudates also, hemorrhages also, cotton wool spots, everything. Now coming to the moderate. In the moderate, what is important, that you have the interretinal microvascular abnormality. So instead of reading everything, okay, remembering everything, you can say that if I have IRMA, then we have reached to the moderate stage. Then you have got more extensive intraretinal microvascular abnormalities, and along with the venous changes. Venous bleeding is also there, then it is also one step further, and then finally you have got severe. Severe may you have got the retinal hemorrhages in all the 4 quadrants, bleeding in at least 2 quadrants, and IRMA in at least 1 quadrant. So this is nothing but your 4-2-1 rule. This is your 4-2-1 rule. So 4 means, if I tell you like this, 4, 2 and 1. So in 4 we have got the microaneurysms. If I have got aneurysms in all the 4 quadrants, 2 may venous bleeding. So if I have got venous bleeding in at least 2 quadrants and 1 is I, that is IRMA. So if I have got IRMA in at least 1 quadrant, then these are the 3 criteria which are useful in telling the severity of NPDR. If only 1 criteria is present, it is severe NPDR. If 2 criteria are present, then I will say it is a very severe NPDR. Alright. Now, diabetic maculopathy, I think this is a very important thing, and most of the time questions comes related to the maculopathy, because maculopathy is the most common cause of vision loss in the diabetes. So, we have got a number of patients who are having, macular edema along with the hard exudates. This is the commonest cause of diminution of vision in the diabetic retinopathy. One of the very, very important questions: what is the most common cause of diminution of vision in the patient of diabetes? It is the maculopathy. Both are caused from the leakage of the dilated capillaries. Now, if I talk about the CSME, mark my words, this is going to help you in any of the forms. So, what is CSME? When I talk about the clinically significant macular edema, this is actually edema or the exudates which are present within 500 microns of the foveal center, or if I am having edema of more than 1 disc diameter, any part of which is lying 1 disc diameter of the foveal center. So, see, maculopathy does not follow this criteria. It could be away also, but in order to say that this is clinically significant, I should have edema or the hard exudates lying within 500 microns of the foveal center, plus I am having edema that is at least more than 1 disc diameter. 1 disc means 1.5 mm. So, the edema should be at least 1.5 mm, and any part of it should be lying within 1 disc diameter of the foveal center. Then I say that this is clinically significant macular edema. The leakage can be focal, it could be diffuse, which will lead to focal or diffuse maculopathy. Now, a very, very important thing is your ischemic maculopathy, and last year there was a question in AIIMS also related to, there was an image based question on this ischemic maculopathy. It is actually nothing but your ischemic changes which are occurring at the level of macula, and what are you getting? You are getting the edema, you are getting ischemia, right, at the level of macula, and the patient may complain of diminution of vision. Now, a very important line is could also have normal vision. Now, sometimes examiner may pick up this thing, he will give you normal vision in the question, and if you have not gone through this line, you may be thinking that the patient have macula edema and having normal vision, how this is possible, but it is clearly written that the patient may have the normal vision also. And another very important line is that it is best visualized by the slit lamp biomicroscopy using a 78 diopter or 90D lens. So, this is again a well prescribed question. They ask so many times that what is the best way. So, at that time it is not the direct or indirect ophthalmoscopy, it is the slit lamp biomicroscopy. As a loss of foveal reflex you will be getting, you will getting thickening around the fovea. How will you treat it? Very important, treatment is by photocoagulation, and for photocoagulation we use argon laser, diode laser or frequency doubled Nd:YAG. So, all same, argon, diode or frequency doubled Nd:YAG we are using. For your investigation, angiography, you have already seen chapter number 9, all the clinical investigations. Fluorescein angiography is a very good way identifying the areas of leakage, and you can directly photocoagulate them, okay, in a grid pattern, so that you avoid the FAS. It's very important that you avoid the foveal avascular zone, because if you are going there, you may increase the chances of ischemia. Now, fluorescein angiography also helps to diagnose the ischemic maculopathy, in which photocoagulation is not helpful and should not be attempted. Again, a very important thing. If you are having a patient of diabetic maculopathy, should not do the photocoagulation, because already it has got a ischemic area as the foveal avascular zone. All right. Now, coming to the Now, coming to the management of diabetic retinopathy. So, therapy depends upon the grading, depending upon the type. So, one is this type of retinopathy, then you have got therapy and you have got the indications. So, if I have got just NPDR which is mild, you can just go with the control of the diabetes, glycemic index control, nothing else. But if you have got maculopathy, okay, so if you have got clinically significant macular edema, you have to do the focal photocoagulation. If you are having diffuse involvement of the macula, go for the grid. You can also go for the intravitreal triamcinolone or anti-VEGF. Now, this tabular form will always help you recall the things better. So if you are having a question of the diabetic maculopathy, okay, maybe they have given you a whole clinical scenario and the final answer is the diabetic maculopathy. So you have to see whether it is clinically significant, whether it is diffuse. So if it is clinically significant, focal photocoagulation. If it is diffuse leakage, focal will not help. You can go for the grid, you can go for the intravitreal triamcinolone, you can also go for anti-VEGF. Then if you have succinate, if you have got the succinate, then we can go for the focal photocoagulation. If I have got severe NPDR, then you can go for the frequent review. But NPDR per se we are not treating. Okay. If I have got PDR, obviously I will be treating. I have to give PRP, the typical one, and then advanced diabetic eye disease means complications. So in the complications, I will have to go for the surgery, that is your vitreoretinal surgeries, right? Now coming to the succinate retinopathy. Succinate retinopathy means when you are having a ring-like arrangement of the hard exudates, which is typically found in the diabetic retinopathy. So here what you are getting, it is due to the chronic edema involving a considerable large area around the macula. So if we have got chronic edema for a very long time and a large area also around the macula, then we have got chances of the succinate retinopathy, especially in the macular area, and this will lead to the massive changes in the retina itself. It occurs in the elderly people, okay, then it may be a part of diabetic retinopathy or a hypertensive retinopathy. Now, though they have used this term formally that it could be both diabetic and hypertensive, for all practical purposes, succinate retinopathy means diabetes, okay. Then a girdle of bright white patches with crenated borders appears around the macula. We have got aggregations of macrophages, lipids. So basically hard exudates are nothing but the lipids or the lipoprotein deposits. That is why they are yellowish white, waxy looking deposits. The diameter of the girdle, which is usually imperfect circle. So this could be a circle, ellipse or a horseshoe shaped, and they are generally greater than 1 disc diameter, and usually when you will follow them, they will be actually following the large temporal branches of superior and inferior temporal vessels. Treatment may be effective if the source of vascular leakage is destroyed. Now, basically when I am thinking about the treatment, I have to think about the source and I have to destroy it by the photocoagulation. I can also give the intravitreal steroids that I am giving in the form of triamcinolone. Then we also can give the anti-VEGF agents. There can also be used if the patient is not ready, or maybe photocoagulation is not that suitable for this patient, or as a combination therapy also we can give this. So this is the typical picture of the succinate retinopathy. Can you see the hard exudates in the ring shape pattern? So if this kind of picture is given to you in the question, always think about the succinate retinopathy related to the macula and the diabetes. Now coming to your severe non-proliferative, which can also be called as pre-proliferative. So both are synonymous in a way, either it is severe non-proliferative or it is the pre-proliferative. So if you have got ischemic changes along with the background diabetic retinopathy, then that will produce a pre-proliferative. The fundus will show you a lot of IRMA. If you remember the 4-to-1 rule, we have got microaneurysms in all the 4 quadrants, venous changes in at least 2 quadrants, and IRMA in at least 1 quadrant. So you have got IRMA, shunt vessels, you have got ischemia, and ischemic area should be more than 8 to 10 areas. You have got dilatation and irregularities. So basically when these changes are coming, more and more microaneurysms, more and more venous bleeding, more and more intraretinal changes. So basically these are going towards more devastating form of the proliferative diabetic retinopathy. They should be reviewed more frequently. How will you review it? By the angiography, and you should do the photocoagulation at the first sign of new vessels in the retina. Again, an important guideline. Suppose they ask you that when should you do the photocoagulation? So they have clearly said that the photocoagulation should be done at the very first glimpse of the new vessels in the retina. PRP should be undertaken if the follow-up is not possible, and if you think that frequent follow-up is not possible in this patient, even you can go for the PRP directly also. Now coming to the proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So finally coming to the PDR, about two-third of type 1 diabetics are likely to develop the proliferative diabetic retinopathy just in the 3 decades. Neovascularization can be of 2 types. We can have over the disc, that is your NVD, or it can be elsewhere, which can be along the major blood vessels that you already know. and it appears adjacent to the areas of capillary closure. You have got fibrous tissue, and such fibrovascular tissue may lie flat on the retina, okay, and that will lead to the vitreous traction, and that vitreous traction may even lead to the tractional retinal detachment. We can have retinal separation also. And this PDR, proliferative diabetic retinopathy, if you remember, this is the commonest cause of vitreous hemorrhage in adults. See, so many times this question is also asked. What is the commonest cause of the vitreous hemorrhage in adults? It is the PDR, extension of the neovascular process into the anterior segment. Now, sometimes when you have lot of ischemia, that ischemia leading to neovascularization can also go towards the anterior side. That produces the rubeosus iridis. Rubeosus iridis will lead to the neovascularization of the iris, and that can lead to even neovascular glaucoma. And that is why the most common cause of neovascular glaucoma is nothing but the PDR. Now coming to the treatment. So if I talk about the treatment of diabetic retinopathy, if I talk about the proliferative diabetic retinopathy, it is actually the photocoagulation. So you have to reduce the vascular endothelial growth factor, because by far that is responsible for many of the effects. So you are coagulating the vessels, you are decreasing the VEGF by giving the anti-VEGF agents, right? So what will happen when you are doing these things? This will relieve the retina of the edema and the hard exudates. It will improve its function. There will be no formation of new blood vessels, so less of hemorrhage will be there. And all those patients who have got neovascularization affecting more than 1/3 of the disc surface, that is, if the neovascularization is more than 0.5 disc diameter or vitreous hemorrhage, they are very, very high risk and they require urgent PRP. So again, I am highlighting this because they are giving you a clear-cut guideline which could be available in the question. So they are saying that if a patient is having the neovascularization which is more than 1/3 of the disc surface, disc is 1.5 mm. So if it is more than 0.5 mm or 500 microns, or you are having a vitreous hemorrhage, then they are believed to be at high risk for the severe visual loss, and therefore you should go for the urgent PRP. This is done using, now how will you do it? For this we are using a retinal laser lens, and a circular area of radius 2.5 disc diameter with the fovea at its center is left untouched. Now another important thing, when you are doing the PRP, you have to leave the central area. How much area you have to leave? A radius of 2.5 disc diameter with the fovea at its center you have to leave. So 1.5 to optic disc hai, then you have to leave 1 disc diameter also all around. So total 2.5 disc diameter I have to leave. Now photocoagulation mein what are the lasers I am using? Argon laser, frequency doubled Nd:YAG laser, or the diode lasers, okay. And the spot burns, these spots are of 200 microns each. In all the meridians it is extended anteriorly to the equator using the spot burns of 500 microns. So in the macular area you are using the larger one, smaller one, that is 200 microns, but away from the macular area I can use the larger one, that is your 500 microns. Burns are applied to blench the RPE and you are obliterating the deeper layers. And what is the total number of burns? It is 2000 to 3000. If you remember, I told you earlier also that this total number of burns is given less in Khurana, so that may be less appropriate. That is the starting range. What they have given is 1200 to 1600. That is the starting we are doing, and totally we are going to 2000 to 3000. You have to leave the central area of the macula to 2.5 disc diameter, and its fovea should be at the center. So 1.5 is the optic disc, and you are leaving 1 disc diameter around. Fovea is also same, 1.5. Now the spot burns, the spot of lasers that you are giving in the macular area is 200 microns, while in the away peripheral area it is the 500 microns. So this is the picture of the PRP that we are doing, and it is producing a ring kind of scotoma. Central area you can very well see we have left untouched. So around that 3 mm area, that is between the optic disc and the macula, that we are leaving, and in the periphery we can give. In the diabetics, then you have to do the long term visual results also of the PRP. They are most encouraging. Neovascularization is usually regressing after the laser therapy, but neovascular glaucoma is the major cause of visual failure along with the tractional retinal detachment. So though you know, we are helping the patients, lot of patients with the PRP. What are the two main causes of the failure even after the PRP? One is the neovascular glaucoma, and another is the fractional retinal detachment. The successful visual results require long-term follow-up. You have to do repeated photocoagulation of the recurrent neovascularization and the macular leaks. Then adjunct treatments. We can inhibit the VEGF, allowing the greater success in controlling. We have got anti-VEGF agents like bevacizumab, ranibizumab, and we have got the aflibercept. They have been developed, and we are using them very popularly. They have been used in the treatment of diabetic retinopathy, right? Then if I talk about the triamcinolone, the steroid, okay, this is an intravitreal dose of 1, 2 or 4 milligram. They have been evaluated for the diabetic macular edema, because you know, all patients of the diabetic macular edema do not require the photocoagulation. All people we may not be able to give also because of the ischemic maculopathy. So there we can easily use this intravitreal triamcinolone. In more advanced cases where I am having the fibroproliferative retinopathy, I am having a tractional retinal detachment or vitreous hemorrhage, okay, then what you have to do? You have to do the vitreoretinal surgery. So surgery is the treatment of choice only when I have got the fibrosis. Early vitrectomy is more beneficial, in which cases who are having type 1 diabetes, who are younger, who are prone to severe proliferative retinopathy. Early removal of the vitreous, which acts as a scaffolding for the new blood vessels, will also prevent the development of neovascularization. So it's always good that whenever you get this fibrovascular tissue, you remove it at the earliest. A tractional retinal detachment is again treated by excising the fibrovascular tissue, and you have to break the inner breaks, okay, you have to seal the retinal breaks that may be caused by the traction, because you know, once it has gone into the RD, you have to treat it as RD, and obviously the visual prognosis will also be worse than the diabetic retinopathy itself. Now a peculiar feature sometimes met with diabetes is also lipemia. It occurs especially in the young patients who are having more of triglycerides, at least more than 2000 milligram per 100 ml. And what will happen, this condition is found in those patients who are having marked ascitosis. So if you look at the ophthalmoscopic appearances, they are called as the lipemia retinalis, and lipemia means lipids, so they look whitish in color. The vessels contain the fluid which looks like milk, arteries are pale red, and the veins have a violet tint. The fundus has a normal coloration. So though you know, it's not a very common condition and not very frequently asked in the examination, but yes, because it is something related to diabetic retinopathy and the diabetes, you should know that there is one more condition, which is your lipemia retinalis. So this was all about the diabetic retinopathy. I think this is very important not to leave topic. You may not be able to cover each and every topic in every subject, but there are certain mandatory topics where you cannot afford to leave even the one thing about it. So I think diabetic retinopathy is of course that one such topic. So every important information about the diabetic retinopathy from all the reliable sources is absolutely important, and that is why I try to cover the diabetic retinopathy from the Parsons. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.